You're listening to Podcasts with Park Rangers, a show where we explore the importance of our national parks and historic sites with those who live and work in them every day. We'll learn about history, science, and the beauty of nature from a unique perspective. I'm your host, Lucas VK. Today we interview Ranger Mark Biel, the Natural Resources Program Manager at Glacier National Park.
Great place to have a family and raise children. There's so much to do that we live in a place that a lot of people come to vacation at. And so we got to keep reminding ourselves of that, about how lucky we are to be here, that, you know, this is a destination that some people never get to see, or many people might only get here once in their lifetime. So we're lucky enough to call it home.
Stay tuned. We'll talk to Mark about wildlife safety and his work with man's best friend, Ranger Gracie. Hey, National Parks fan. Want to be part of something pretty special? Over the next couple weeks, we'll be giving away some stuff. Become a podcast patron by September 3rd, and you'll get Podcasts with Park Rangers stickers, a personalized National Parks postcard, and a wildlife trading card as featured on this episode, while supplies last. You can become a patron by visiting patreon.com/virtual camper. That's virtual KAMPER. Or check out the show notes for this episode. Wildlife safety. As more visitors come to the parks every year, we hear more and more about people interacting with animals in an unsafe way for both the animals and the humans. In Yellowstone, several visitors are gored by bison every year, and bears become acclimated to human food via remnants left behind from visitors. Every park with wildlife has issues, and they must come up with creative ways to manage these problems. Glacier National Park is no exception. Bears, mountain lions, bighorn sheep, and mountain goats, just to name a few, keep the resource rangers of the park busy. Ranger Mark Biel took it on himself to come up with a creative way to keep the animals at a safe distance from park visitors. And his journey is one we've wanted to cover since we began the podcast. Meet Ranger Gracie. She's Mark's pet border collie with a very important job. She's trained to keep dangerous wildlife encounters from occurring and is a bit of a celebrity herself. So, how did Ranger Gracie go from house pet to the work she does today? To hear this story and more, we sit down with Resource Ranger Mark Biel.
Well, I'm Mark Biel with Ranger Gracie here, and we'd like to welcome you to Glacier, and glad you could make it.
Ranger Mark has worked with the Park Service for 25 years, 8 of which have been at Glacier. His career spans a multitude of parks, and he's worked with a huge variety of wildlife.
I actually started in Yellowstone National Park, working in bear management and bison management and helping with the wolf reintroduction. And then worked at Bryce Canyon National Park in southern Utah for a couple of years, and then Padre Island National Seashore down in South Texas. And then also worked at Bell's Tower National Monument up in northeast Wyoming, and then worked our way back up to Montana. So I've worked pretty much with everything from the Utah prairie dog up to bison in Yellowstone.
Before his career began, Mark found himself looking for something new after a rough day at work.
So I was fresh out of graduate school and couldn't find a job, and was waiting tables and had a particularly horrible day. This was down in Memphis, Tennessee, and went home and looked at the want ads, and I saw an ad in the paper that said, "Spend your summer in Yellowstone." And I said, well, it's got to be better than what I'm doing here. So I sent in my application to work with the park concessioner, and I did guided horseback rides in Yellowstone, and then liked that a whole lot.
During his spare time, Mark began down a path which would lead him to become a park ranger at Yellowstone.
Started talking to some people that I met that worked for the Park Service, and they suggested that I try and volunteer on my days off, and so I started doing that. And by the end of the summer I was hooked and wanted to stay there, so I applied for the concessioner again to drive a snow coach in the winter, and so I got to drive a snow coach, and then continued to volunteer with bear management, and one more summer as a horseback guide and then I was able to get hired by the Park Service in my position there, and the rest they say is history. So yeah.
So that got you started at Yellowstone,
Mm-hmm.
and you were there for how long?
I was there about 12 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was much better than Tennessee, you said?
Oh yeah.
Much better than waiting tables.
Yeah, much better than waiting tables. That's an underappreciated job, I think. But yeah, Tennessee's beautiful, but it's no Yellowstone. So.
Mm-hmm. So you've worked your way to Glacier, which is also an amazing place. Of course, Yellowstone is beautiful, but Glacier National Park, we've heard, this is our first visit, we've heard from friends and fellow travelers how awesome it is,
Mm-hmm.
how beautiful it is. And until coming here, I didn't realize just how gorgeous Glacier is. So I'm wondering if you could help us just through our audio medium
Mm-hmm.
to paint a picture of the landscape and some of the features that are here in Glacier.
Yeah, so Glacier National Park is just over 1 million acres, and it's located in the heart of what we call the crown of the continent ecosystem. The Blackfeet Indians used to call, or still do, call Glacier National Park the backbone of the world. And if you drive around and you just see those jagged peaks sticking up, kind of looks like a spine.
Yeah.
It runs, the Continental Divide, pretty much goes right through the park, the whole length of it from north to south. It's known for its high alpine environments. There's a lot of alpine vegetation and areas, glaciers. It's famous for its glaciers.
The namesake.
Yep. Actually, the namesake, interestingly, is for the glacial process from the continental size glacial ice fields.
Okay.
Not so much for the ones that are kind of the remnant here, but more for the glacial process. So
right.
And
which shaped this land
yes,
into
exactly.
the beautiful area that it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, it's kind of a unique park because there's really, there's one main road through it. It's the 54-mile long Going to the Sun Road.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone ever has a chance to ride that, the scenery is breathtaking and beautiful. And if you have a aversion to heights, you probably want to not be the driver because the road literally hangs on the side of mountains, and we have a size restriction on vehicles that can go over because it's just super narrow and windy.
Yeah. A lot of exposure out there.
A lot of exposure up there, yeah. But yeah, so very well known for our wildlife, also in vegetation species. We're
Right.
fairly
And there's some variety there too because of the Continental Divide.
yes. Yeah, so west of the divide, we get a lot more kind of like what we're experiencing today, this, more temperate rainfall,
Yeah, more
rainforest
humid
type.
climate.
And then the east side is more dry, more grassland area. But then again, we have a lot of the alpine, a lot of that exposed mountaintop. So it's definitely a hiker's park. So we have over 740 miles of trail, and it's quite popular. It's of all the parks I've been to, it's almost more of a different clientele that goes there because it's like Yellowstone, you would get in your car and drive to Canyon or drive to Old Faithful or drive to Mammoth, and here we only have pretty much the Going to the Sun Road going, the main road through the park. We have other smaller roads,
which is only open seasonally. So
right.
To really access a lot of the park throughout the year, we're talking hiking, backpacking.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of people doing that, and so it's kind of neat to see that portion of the population is still out there that likes to experience the country like that. So,
yeah,
so
these wild places up here. Another thing that really stood out to me, which maybe we could talk about a little bit, is these glacial lakes, which are an amazing sort of teal color. There's some interesting geology there as well.
Yeah, so that's the color in a lot of those lakes is caused by glacial flour. And so a lot of the glaciers that remain just kind of scour the rock and just grind it. And then as they warm up in the summer and you get that runoff, it carries that material with it, and then it winds up in the rivers and in the lakes, and it refracts that blue or teal turquoise color light. And so you get those really unique colors.
Right.
So.
And then all the runoff, of course, creates tons of waterfalls.
Yes, lots of waterfalls, especially early in the year. Dry up a little more so as the time goes by, but yeah, it's definitely like a waterfall paradise here in the spring, in the early summer,
which is when we're joining you, and we're joining Gracie over there.
Yes,
we kind of introduced you, but not the very unique work you do with your bark ranger, who is here with us right now. She's staying very quiet. She's sleeping. So it is a unique job, which we're featuring here on the show, and a lot of people have been very interested in it, as are we. Can you talk about what you do in the park with Gracie? And then you do a good bit of stuff as the branch chief
of natural. So the work we do with Gracie in the park, At first, we thought it was going to involve a lot of her moving wildlife out of high visitor use areas where the people and the wildlife were starting to get way too close together, and we were starting to see some interactions that were kind of sketchy. And
yeah, they're getting habituated to.
Getting habituated to people, and when people come here, there's not many places easily accessible where you can see bighorn sheep and mountain goats, and so people get excited and they forget what they should be doing or how they should act around wildlife. So with Gracie, what we do is use her then to push the wildlife out of the parking lot. They only usually run about 50 to 75 yards away, and then they stop, at which point Gracie and I leave we release the pressure, and I usually, just to get them to move, it just takes Gracie walking up towards them, and they kind of see the way she moves, they interpret as different than a typical dog. I guess you get that border collie creep.
Yeah,
and so
kind of like a wolf stalking them or something.
Yeah. And so they'll focus in on that, and they kind of turn around and bop away and stop. And if they're past a certain point, we're trying to give them like a hard line on the landscape that they're like, okay, once you get past that, we'll release the pressure, which is just basically us approaching them.
Yeah. Teaching them that that's the safe zone for them, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that usually is over with fairly quickly, and then we spend a lot of the rest of the time that we go up to Logan Pass interacting with the public. And so we spend a lot of time answering questions about what is a park ranger, why does the park ranger do that, why is it such a concern. And so if I were just walking around up there with just me, people wouldn't want to approach me or ask a lot of those questions, but they see her. And, she's a beautiful blue Merle border collie, and they want to come up and pet her and interact with her, and then I got them. So, so she's like a lure. I fish for the visitors.
Right. Yeah. Fishing for those opportunities to educate.
Yeah.
Which come a lot easier when you have a pretty border collie here to approach and pet. Yeah.
So, and the impetus behind it was, we're in the process of coming up with a management plan for the going to the Sun Road corridor, because we've been seeing record visitation every year for the past 5 or 6 years, it seems like. And
every year more.
More, yeah. We were actually down this year through April, but then we had the busiest May on record, and now we're back up about 15% above what we were at this time last year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And last year we didn't think we could accommodate any more people in the park. So trying to get this plan on how we can better disperse use along the corridor, maybe try and get people to go to different areas of the park. And when we went out to the public for thoughts and ideas, as well as employees of the park, the one topic that came up over and over again was people's concern about the human-wildlife interactions that everyone was seeing.
Yeah.
So that came from the public and from the park employees.
So were these interactions becoming dangerous to humans, dangerous to wildlife, both?
They're always dangerous to both. What we were seeing was just an increase in the number of them. As you get more people, you just start, I guess it's just a matter of numbers. But so we were just seeing more and more, and we, instead of being, waiting for something bad to happen, I tend to try and like to be, proactive instead of reactive. And,
sure.
And so I saw what some other parks were doing, like Waterton Lakes National Park in Canada, our sister park, contracted with a company that would use border collies to get the mule deer out of the housing area up there, the town site, before they dropped their fawns. Because what was happening is they were having fawns. The deer would then try and protect their fawns if people walked by the sidewalk where the fawn was hiding or had a dog, and so people and pets were getting aggressively charged and injured in some cases. And so they went with this company to try and get the deer out before that became an issue.
Yeah, give them different habitats that weren't in town.
Exactly. Yeah. And they were even starting to see predators come into town.
Oh, really? Yeah.
To, again, to target those fawns. And so, having a grizzly bear running around in the middle of the night when people might be, returning from a long day of hiking or dinner isn't a good thing. So, and then the National Mall in Washington, D.C., they spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars to redo the whole reflecting pool years ago, and a whole new filtration system and everything. And when they turned everything on after they were done, I think it was only open for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 months before they had to shut it down because it just got fouled with goose and duck poop.
Oh,
so they had to drain it, and they had to clean it out and replace parts. And when they were doing that, they thought, we can't keep doing this. So they contracted with a company called the Geese Police. And so they used the border collies then to keep geese and ducks either out of the reflecting pool or off the lawn at the National Mall. Because they were turning the whole lawn into kind of a greasy mess.
Yeah.
Where people couldn't really enjoy picnics or sports. And that's been really successful. And also in the past, Glacier's used Karelian bear dogs back in the early 90s to deal with habituated bears along the roads, and that was highly successful.
Karelian
Karelian bear dog, yeah.
Okay, larger breed, I'd imagine.
Yeah, a little bigger than what Gracie is, and she's 45 pounds.
Yeah.
But just stockier, and they're bred for dealing with bears. So, and that's kind of their mindset. So, So anyways, seeing what all they were doing, it was like, okay, it seems to be working for them. I just happened to have a dog. Gracie started out as a pet. I didn't get her with the intent to do this program.
Right. Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of a unique approach. And
she is of a breed that other programs were using.
Yes,
and
exactly.
were kind of proven out as being good for this sort of wildlife management.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I looked into, what it would cost if we were to do contracts, and, the Park Service doesn't have a lot of spare money laying around.
Yeah.
So I threw the idea out there to our park leadership team and some of the division chiefs, and said, hey, what do you think? Are you guys all right with me going through this and trying this approach? And gave them my examples, and they said, yeah, that sounds great. I had to find the funding to make it happen, though. And so I was able to write a grant through the Glacier National Park Conservancy to get funding to train Gracie and myself. And we actually got trained down at the Wind River Bear Institute south of Missoula, who trains the Karelian bear dogs.
Okay. And that was through funding, you say the Conservancy, that's the Friends group in this area? Okay.
And so it was all private donations that funded the project. Now, it's very cost effective because, I like it here. I don't want to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be here for a while. So instead of a contract for tens of thousands of dollars, for less than $10,000, we got Gracie and me trained. And we're going on year 3 now of trying to educate and change people's views and opinions on how to act around habituated wildlife.
Okay. So this will be the 3rd season of that. So what was the process of kind of running this up the chain? Why did the Park Service decide that this was the thing to do?
I think they heard loud and clear from the employees and from the public that one of the main topics that kept coming up over and over again that we heard loud and clear was people's concern about the number and type of human-wildlife interactions that were going on. Several members of the public, were like, you need to do something before somebody gets hurt. And we're like, well, we're aware of that and we're trying.
Yeah.
And so, again, I came up with the idea and I approached my boss. I said, hey, you all right if I bring this forward? Will I have your support? And he said, yes, but check with the Chief Ranger. So I checked with the Chief Ranger at the time, and he thought it was a great idea and had several good questions that, I answered for him. And then with their support, I went forward to the park leadership team, the superintendent, and they supported that. They wanted me to touch base with our regional office people, though, in Denver. So I reached out to them.
Okay.
And then I also reached out to some other parks in the system that have mountain goats.
Yeah.
And just to see what they were doing. And everyone was like, we never heard of it being done before, but
go for it.
Go for it. All these other examples, sound pretty good.
Okay.
So
you got sign off on a lot of accounts there.
Yeah. So there's a lot of.
So what is still being done by these other parks who perhaps don't have a park ranger, and what was being done in previous years here?
So what a lot of parks do is, there's the old, tried and true techniques. If you have a vehicle with a siren and lights and, an animal's causing problems, you would clear people and then use the vehicle and the noise to try and scare the animals in the opposite direction.
And there's a particular name for this process.
Yeah, it's called aversive conditioning or hazing. Wildlife
That's
hazing.
That's the one I've heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another technique is, you get a bunch of rocks in a aluminum can and you kind of shake it. And, they don't like that noise and they move away. Or you shake a black plastic garbage bag to, the movement and the noise tends to make them move.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of that's real effective initially, but then, those were pretty much the only options we had. And so if you go to the well too many times, those techniques lose their effectiveness.
Yeah.
So that's what we were finding here in Glacier. Some of the staff that worked at Logan Pass were like, we go out there and make our, shake our noise cans or wave garbage bags, and, the sheep will just stand there. They'll move 10 feet away and look at us and not do anything. So, Gracie's not the do-all, end-all, but she's another tool in the toolbox then that hopefully, the wildlife won't get accustomed to, because right now we're pretty much only able to get up there at best one night a week.
Okay.
Just because of my other duties. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not a full-time park ranger master, but...
Yeah, there's a lot to do in a large park like this, and with your role here, this is one of many things, but it's certainly serving its purpose, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So is the hazing losing its effect at all with Gracie, the same way that it was with the shaking?
No, not that we've seen so far. We've done 2 winters now in the park headquarters area to haze the deer out because we've been getting a lot of mountain lions. And so far, The deer will see Gracie coming from 50 or 100 yards away, and they'll turn around, and we've actually been able to identify like 5 or 6 specific areas where they come in and out of the housing area.
Okay.
And if they see us coming, they'll head right towards one of those areas and head out, mosey out of the housing area. Then they'll usually stay away for 3 or 4 hours, which, by then in the wintertime it's getting dark and people are less likely to be out with their pets or their children. So the deer come back in, and then in the morning we start it all over again.
Okay. So going on the morning and an evening walk serves a dual purpose in that sense.
Yeah.
It actually takes care of some of the wildlife habituating that might be going on here.
Yeah. And actually I've heard from a couple employees that live here in the headquarters area that have dogs, that when they walk their dogs now, the deer will see them and they'll also start
same sort of thing.
Leaving, which is great, because then it's kind of like increasing your staff, so to speak, your park ranger staff, by just having people walk their dogs. So and
unofficial deputy park ranger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So were there particular instances that stand out? Were there some stories that alerted the public to the need for this, or?
Well, one of the biggest stories, that it wasn't in Glacier, but in 2010, there was a hiker in Olympic National Park that was in an area where there was a habituated goat. And he actually, the goat was aggressively following them. And so one gentleman...
Probably associated hikers with food at that
point.
With
food or a source of salt, yeah. And so this gentleman had his friends go ahead, and he tried to shoo the goat away or whatever, but the goat got very aggressive and hooked him with a horn and actually severed one of his arteries, and he bled out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so when we went out to the public for the Sun Road Corridor comment period, that was the one that always came up. They always said, you need to do something before something like what happened in Olympic happens here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything that, the folks at Olympic were doing wrong. It was just, I think, just a bad timing, wrong place at the wrong time type scenario. But
a natural fallout of more visitorship, I guess. Just the numbers game, as you said before.
Yeah. So that one pretty much sticks out. But again, we've been seeing a lot more trash on the parking lot at Logan Pass, which again draws in the wildlife.
Sure.
We've been seeing a lot more instances of people that probably wouldn't even approach Gracie on the street or let their kids pet her because you don't know that dog. But then these same people are like, oh, go stand next to that mountain goat or bighorn sheep and I'll take your picture.
Like a wild animal is fine.
But it's very habituated. They're very tolerant of people at close places, and people confuse that with being tame. And even the habituated wildlife are still wild animals, are extremely dangerous potentially. And so we were just seeing an increase in the number of situations like that, or people trying to feed the wildlife, which is illegal in the national parks, and just getting way too close. So, and then in some instances, some of the goats or sheep following people off the trail as they went to answer nature's call.
Yeah.
The sheep and goats use that actually as a source of minerals.
Oh, they do? Okay.
They do, yeah. So all that kind of wrapped into one wasn't necessarily one instance or one situation, but kind of all that growing.
But then this circumstance in Olympic definitely brought it to the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah.
And then you see that sort of habituating. It's just a matter of time, I guess.
Right, yeah. It definitely, I would say increases the potential for something like that. So again, we were just trying to be proactive instead of waiting for something bad to happen and then, we're going to do this, and this. Let's try and do something before it gets there.
Right.
And educate
sounds like
the public.
It's been pretty successful on an educational level. Definitely, it's been very successful. I mean, we're here to meet with you and Gracie, and a lot of other media has really picked up on this, the work that you're doing here.
Yeah.
So what does Gracie do on her days off?
On her days off, she's usually at home, and she's usually in this position, laying on her side with her head tucked under her feet, but on the back deck or on the lawn out back.
Yeah.
And
she has to rest up for the hard work
she has to rest up, rest and recover from her hard work schedule. But she'll hang out. Occasionally we'll see her and our cat Bob hanging out together. But usually that's more of a frenemy relationship that they have there.
I was going to say, do they get along?
They actually get along pretty good, but every now and then Bob, our cat, just gets crazy and decides he's going to chase Gracie around, and he's like 12 pounds and Gracie's 45, and it's funny you'll see him running circles around the island in the kitchen, but it's the cat chasing the dog. So not what one would expect.
So she's not aggressive towards your animals at home, but she definitely is trained to show aggression, at least to the wildlife here.
Yeah, and actually it doesn't even take much of like an aggressive posture or an aggressive noise. Again, it's more just, I think, the way she focuses on them. The wildlife tend to see her as a a predator.
A predator, yeah.
Yeah, so they see her as a predator. They're being a prey species. They're like, I don't like the way that's looking at me, so I think we'll move away. So when we're talking about moving these animals out of a high visitor use area, it's usually just us approaching with Gracie on leash at a slow walk, and the sheep or goats looking at us, turn around and just kind of trotting away, and it's usually over in less than a minute.
Yeah.
And then, they'll occasionally kind of start working their way back towards the parking lot, and so Gracie and I walk around the perimeter where we have that line that I was talking about.
Yeah. So they kind of test, and you need to reinforce the safe zone.
Yep.
So would you say, as you approach the third season now with a Bark Ranger here in the park, would you say that the program with Gracie has been successful?
Yeah, we're trying to get a handle on what metrics to measure, to see.
Because it's a fairly new thing, so how do you measure success in this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd like to have some kind of statistics to say, yes, we're showing this type of response. I'm still working with some individuals on, every hazing event we do, we record, number of animals, where, time of day, and how far they are initially, how far they move off, and then how long they stay away before they come back in.
Okay.
And so we do that with all the techniques that we have. So we'll have the people that wave the garbage bags or clap their hands or shout also record that, okay, we did 6 sheep today and they moved 20 yards away for 5 minutes or whatever, just to throw out an example. And that way then we can compare all those fields and the different techniques. And right now we don't have enough sample size for all of those.
Okay. But you are kind of approaching it through a scientific method sort of thing, capturing the data.
Yeah. So, because it'd be nice, the private donor that gave us the money in the conservancy, if they ask me if it's working, they gave me money, of course I'll say yes, it's working, but I want to be more scientific about it and actually be able to say, yes, it's working and this is why, or no, it's not and this is why, or we don't see a difference and this is why.
Yeah, so, to be able to quantify it somehow for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But in terms of exposure and awareness, it does seem to be working. I mean, you're interacting with the public quite a bit, right?
This is mushroom cloud. This is anything so much bigger than anything I thought it could become. It's national, it's international. We had a group of international tour coordinators early in the year that were meeting in Kalispell because they specialize in trips from their country to Montana, and several of them, when they heard they were coming to Glacier, wanted to meet the Bark Ranger. And so we did. And so Gracie met tour coordinators from Italy and France and Germany and at least, I think, 15 other countries. And
wow.
So from the education and the awareness standpoint, it's definitely getting out there. I think before we see any big change again in that mindset that people have that we're trying to change on what is appropriate around wildlife, will probably take a little longer. That's a big ship we're trying to turn, and it takes a while to turn those big ships. But,
steering a mindset.
Yeah. And so, maybe I'm being too ambitious or whatever, but I like to think we could do this because we did it with bears. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was all the rage to let's go to the dump and let's watch the bears eat garbage. And back then, if you would have asked people, what they thought of that, you probably would have had 90% of them saying, oh, it's cool, I get to see bears. And then, it probably took, 30 years or so, maybe not that long, but to turn that tide where you ask people and it's like maybe get 90% saying that's a horrible idea. Why would you do that? I'd rather see them in the natural environment.
Yeah.
And so I kind of equate what I'm trying to do here with Gracie and habituated wildlife and human wildlife interactions with what was done with the bears. But it's like I said, it's a big ship to turn.
It is.
You got to start at some point.
And even today, you see some weird sort of mindsets like there was a hashtag like bear selfie or something like that, and it's like that's not a good idea. That's not something to be trending,
Yeah. But so that's kind of what we're trying to do. Like I said, maybe I'm being over ambitious or optimistic, but you gotta start somewhere.
Sure.
And from what we were seeing happening and where things were going, I'd like to think we started it in time that we can maybe start shifting that paradigm to people saying, no, don't go stand next to that sheep to get your picture taken. That's dangerous. It's a wild animal. So
don't turn your back on wildlife. Don't approach more than you want to stay more than 100 yards from something like a bear.
100 yards from bears and wolves, and then 25 yards from everything else.
Okay.
And what confuses people is like, well, I'm on the trail, but they walk towards me. And it's like, well, you can back up.
Yeah. Maintain that distance.
You don't have to just stand there and let them walk right up to you and go through your backpack or whatever they're trying to do. But, maintain that distance in a manner that is still safe for you. Like if you're on the edge of a cliff, we don't expect you to scale down or up, to let something go by, but do the best you can. And we actually, again, through the Conservancy, Glacier National Park Conservancy, got a project funded for a set of trading cards. And on the back of those trading cards, there's a safety message that says the wildlife may not know better, but you do. To try and turn that around, put that back on the people, like, oh yeah, okay, I know I'm supposed to stay 25 yards or 100 yards away.
Right.
And so we use those cards, again, educational outreach. We have one general card, again, stay 25 yards or 100 yards away from wildlife. We have 9 cards of wildlife species that we see commonly habituated to people in Glacier.
Okay. And that kind of helps people identify. They have a visual aid at that point.
Exactly, yeah. And then we have one of Gracie also that explains the program and what we're trying to do.
Nice.
And the impetus behind that was one night at Logan Pass. There's the parking lot, and then you walk up a set of stairs, and then there's a couple of grassy areas where a lot of ground squirrels live.
Yeah.
Before you get to the visitor center. And so, stay 25 yards away doesn't really work there because you got to walk right by them. But I was walking up the stairs, and I saw a little kid, probably 10 or 11 years old, feeding potato chips to the ground squirrel.
Ooh.
So I got all rangery, and said, hey, don't feed the wildlife. And he looked at me and flipped another potato chip. And I got real rangery at that point and went up there and started reading him the riot act. And I looked over there, and his parents had been taking pictures of him feeding the wildlife. So I was giving him the rundown on, how it's, it's not safe for you. It's not good for the wildlife. It's not their natural diet, and they can bite you. They have diseases that can be transmitted between wildlife and humans. And then your parents would be, and I stopped and looked over where the parents were, and his parents left. So I was left there alone with this kid who I was reading the riot act to.
Yeah.
And
he doesn't know any better because he
was
hadn't been
just kind of
taught.
sitting there, looking at it with big eyes. And it would have been nice then to reward, a positive message to end that on instead of hopefully him not remembering, the crazy park ranger that yelled at me for feeding the wildlife. So again, I asked around to other parks what they were doing in other jurisdictions, and people were like, "Oh, you should try trading cards. People love trading cards." And
so other places were doing the trading cards.
Yeah, a lot of states do it. There's a couple other park areas that either have done it in the past or do it to a certain degree. But so what we try and do is get wildlife that's specific to an area, have cards of those animals that we hand out to park staff if they want to participate.
Yeah.
So we have Park Service staff that are in the interpretation division, maintenance, law enforcement, and science and resources, whoever, that'll carry around, like me, got a stack in my pocket so that when you see something, if you see people doing something wrong, correct it, and then give them a card of that species they might have been interacting with.
Yeah.
Again, to get that positive reinforcement, positive message. And then if you see them doing something good, like, hey, yelling at somebody that's trying to, get that bear selfie or something like that. It's like, hey, that's really good. Thanks for doing that. Here's this card with some good information. Thanks for helping us out.
Yeah. And again, maybe they can share that if they continue in those efforts.
Yep, pass it along. And, reward them for doing something good. Because I know, when I do something good and get recognized, I want to do that again. So maybe they'll do that again then. So, and that's been very popular. A lot of people like the trading cards. A lot more adults, though, than kids. I don't know if that's a generational thing or what.
Well, even the Junior Ranger program is popular with some adults as well.
Yep.
So here's a kind of larger question. Why is it important to keep wildlife wild?
Well, that's a good question. That is an excellent one. If for no other reason than just for the sake of preserving things in the wild state that we, in our mind, have of them. When you go to Logan Pass and you see 8 sheep in the parking lot licking up antifreeze or cleaning up someone's garbage, that's not really the image you have of animals in the wild.
Right.
On top of that, licking up the antifreeze or eating garbage off the ground, that's not the type of food or nutrients that they need.
Yeah.
And so they might be putting on weight, but there's good fat and there's bad fat for getting animals through the winter.
Sure.
And by feeding them human food, that's too much of the bad fat.
Yeah.
It doesn't last as long. It's not as, I don't know if energetic is the right word or whatever, but it's depleted faster than the good fat.
It doesn't sustain them out there where they don't have refuge.
Exactly.
That we as humans have.
Yeah.
Eating our human food and then going inside where it's warm.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They don't have the 60-inch TV to sit in front of and spend the winter. So So that's the biggie. There's also, it's not safe for the wildlife because they're hanging out in these areas then where there's a lot of vehicles. They could get hit. We haven't seen it yet in the population, but I assume at some point, there's a tipping point where too much antifreeze isn't good for them. They seem to be a little more tolerant of the antifreeze than like a domestic dog or cat is.
Yeah, because it'll generally kill a dog if they're doing that, but it won't with a goat or something?
No, not that we've seen. We did another 3-year study that ended in 2016 and actually looked for metabolites. And we actually found some metabolites from human sources that we assume is, the ethylene glycol from antifreeze, and it doesn't appear to, at the levels they're getting it currently, to be detrimental to them. They're still reproducing and eating and persisting, but again, at some point, where is that
still
point?
Not healthy? Yeah.
Right. We don't want to say, just feed them what you want or whatever until they start dying, then we'll know it's too much. That's not a good way to manage the wildlife that the nation has entrusted to us. And then, on the flip side of that, having people in that close proximity to the wildlife usually isn't safe for the people either. Again, there are certain diseases that can be transmitted between wildlife and people. There's parasites that the wildlife might have that can get on the people, and they can catch an illness or something that way, or they can get physically injured or harmed or even killed by these wildlife, because even though they appear tame, they are wild. So that's kind of why it's important. And there's a lot in that, from the image in your mind of what a wild animal looks like to the physiological and nutritional and safety and everything. So
it's important on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
So we talked about wildlife. We talked about your job with Gracie. And you mentioned through the course here that you're looking to stay here at Glacier. Is that because you've really connected with this park, do you think? Yeah, the park and just the area. I mean, again, it's a great place to have a family and raise children. There's so much to do that, we got a ski area nearby for the wintertime, and places to ice skate and, downhill or cross-country ski and rafting and kayaking and all kinds of, all the recreation.
All the recreation in the summertime, hiking and camping, and it's amazing. And then, again, just the scenery. And we live in a place that a lot of people come to vacation at. And so we got to keep reminding ourselves of that, about how lucky we are to be here, that, this is a destination that some people never get to see, or many people might only get here once in their lifetime. And so we're lucky enough to call it home. So.
Here year round and year after year. So if you could pin it down, what is your favorite thing about Glacier National Park?
It's just the scenery. I mean, it's just, you go up on the Going to the Sun Road and you just think you've seen the prettiest view in your life that you've ever seen before, and then you round the next corner, and then that one is the prettiest scene you've ever seen before, and they'll never be beat. And then you round the next corner, and it's just, even the road that you've driven, 100 times looks different at different times of day and different weather conditions, different times of the year. And so it's never, the same view or anything twice. So.
Continually sort of awe-inspiring.
And then you just get out, to get to hike in some of these areas and go up to, Grinnell Glacier and see a glacier up close and personal. And the hike, or, the boat ride and the hike that you can take to get there is just, it's fun. Part of the, the park experience that a lot of people like to have.
So what's your favorite thing about working with Gracie? Do you two have a special bond, a connection?
We do. I think that's kind of, the neat thing. She's definitely, very connected to our daughter. She loves our daughter, who's, she just turned 12.
Okay.
My daughter did, not Gracie, but they have a special connection, but it's different than the one that Gracie and I have when we're working, because...
So you have a working relationship with her, but is it more than just a working relationship?
It's more than a working relationship,
Okay.
But it's not quite like what my daughter has with her. But no, it's and then it's just, we work together enough. It's almost to the point where Gracie knows when I need her to go left or right or to stop, and even sometimes before I'm saying it or as I'm saying it, she's already doing it.
Wow.
And then it's just kind of neat to have that connection and to work on that level with, especially a breed as smart as she is. So that's kind of fun.
So with this work that you're doing, you won an award actually for professional excellence in resource leadership. And I guess it was more with your work with Gracie, was it? Yeah,
it was a lot of that. It was, other work that I'd done in my past, but the big impetus for it was the work I'd, started with Gracie here and that we've been doing. So,
because it's notable, it's somewhat new. So we've talked about the importance of this park to you and your connection to it. What feelings come up for you when you think of Glacier National Park? What makes it special to you?
I think just the ruggedness of the park, and again, go back to the beauty of it. I mean, you go to some of these areas, you hike a trail, and you're up on some of these passes where you haven't seen anybody all day, and you get up there and the wind's blowing and you're kind of reminded of, your place in the universe, that you might not be, top of the food chain, or,
Right.
that problem you were worrying about earlier in the day, really isn't that big of a deal. And, looking out there and how things might have been, before the Industrial Revolution even, you get to use your mind and try and, go back in time and envision what it was like, or, experience things in a different way. So it just kind of get out there and makes you consider things from a different viewpoint.
Yeah, gives you a sense of perspective.
Yes.
So why is the national park system as a whole important to you?
Oh, we protect a lot of either landscapes or sites where world-changing, country-changing, significant events occurred.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to, remember the past and commemorate it, whether it was, commemorating something good we did or, something bad, and just recognizing that, so that hopefully we either don't make the same mistake twice, or just, reminds people of how special our country is. And there's some great places to go see. I mean, we were in charge, of caring for some amazing places for the American public. And it's just a great feeling to do something like that. And it's just, again, great to be able to live in areas like this and to do that job. So I consider myself lucky. And so, so I think the Park Service is pretty unique in that bent, everything from pre-Revolutionary War to Revolutionary War to Civil War to World War II to Cold War and wilderness parks and everything in between.
Beauty,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So good breadth of topics to cover. So
sure,
everyone should get out there and experience whatever park is closest to them, because every state has at least one Park Service unit in it now. So
yeah, that's true.
And
there are tons of them, maybe in your own backyard.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, go out and enjoy them. So experience them.
As Ranger Mark mentioned, there's a park in nearly everyone's backyard. With over 400 plus park units, there's something for everyone. Get outside, take a break, and like Mark said, maybe you'll figure out your problems aren't quite as big as they seem. We wanted to leave you with a quick tip on how to find your nearest national park unit. If you go to nps.gov/your state name or abbreviation, you can find a map of the parks in your state. If you live in Montana, visit nps.gov/MT. Or perhaps you're from Ohio, visit nps.gov/Ohio. Hopefully you'll be able to take a trip and learn a bit more about the place you live. If you enjoyed what you heard, review us on iTunes or your favorite podcast provider to help us improve the show. For more behind the scenes and bonus episodes, join our Patreon community. If you sign up by September 3rd, you'll be entered into our National Park Swag giveaway. As always, all new patrons receive a personalized postcard from one of the national parks featured on the show. A link is posted in our show notes, or visit podcastswithparkrangers.com. Stay with us through the final minutes for a short preview of our next episode. We like to highlight on our show ways that a typical park visitor can give back to their national parks. Glacier National Park enlists volunteers to do everything from administrative work and maintenance to backcountry patrols and river guiding. Their volunteer efforts are coordinated through the Glacier National Park Volunteer Associates organization. To find out more, visit gnpva.org. Even though we interview park rangers, we are not affiliated with the National Park Service, and any views expressed are not necessarily those of the Park Service. We're just fans of the national parks, like you. Coming up in episode 19 of Podcasts with Park Rangers, we visit Whitman Mission National Historic Site in Walla Walla, Washington. We explore the beginnings of the Oregon Trail, missionaries, and a tragedy that would rock the U.S. in the mid-1800s.